The snow fell mercilessly over Chicago that December evening, thick white flakes descending from a black sky to blanket the city in silent cold. Inside St. Augustine's Cathedral, warmth radiated from ornate chandeliers that cast a golden glow over hundreds of guests in designer suits and evening gowns. The string quartet had just begun their rendition of Canon in D, the familiar notes rising toward the vaulted ceiling as Alexandra Vance made her entrance on her father's arm. Michael Kingston stood at the altar, 58 years of hard living carved into the lines of his face. His custom tuxedo, worth more than what most men earned in a year, couldn't hide the power in his shoulders or the vigilance in his eyes. As CEO of Kingston Enterprises, he had built an empire that controlled half the city's real estate and commanded respect in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Tonight was to be his crowning achievement: marriage to Alexandra, 36, daughter of Senator Vance, a union that would cement his transition from self-made mogul to legitimate aristocracy. The music swelled. Alexandra glided down the aisle, her smile practiced perfection. Michael's best man, James Reynolds, stood rigid beside him, his background in military special operations evident in his posture. In the front row, Nathan Carter, Michael's financial advisor and oldest friend, checked his watch discreetly. Everything proceeded according to plan, until the cathedral doors slammed open with a crack that silenced the music and froze the procession. The bitter wind howled through the doorway, extinguishing candles and carrying snowflakes that swirled around a small figure standing in the entrance. The guests turned in unison, gasps rippling across the pews. A little girl stood framed in the massive doorway, her blonde curls windblown, her tiny frame swimming in a navy blue coat several sizes too large. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. But it wasn't her unexpected appearance that caused some security to reach for concealed weapons. It was the stainless steel Glock gripped in her small hands, pointed unwaveringly at the altar. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. The girl's arms trembled from the weight of the pistol, but her ice-blue eyes remained steady, focused, determined. Alexandra gasped and clutched her father's arm. Michael stood motionless, his expression unreadable. He lifted a single hand, and all motion in the cathedral ceased. The security team froze, hands hovering near holsters. The only sound was the hollow echo of the little girl's footsteps as she walked forward, snow melting around her worn sneakers on the marble floor. The pistol wavered but never lowered. "My name is Emma Bennett," she announced, her voice clear and surprisingly strong for her size, echoing throughout the sacred space. "My mother is Sarah Bennett. She's dying in a hospital bed 2 miles from here." Michael Kingston didn't blink, but something behind his eyes shifted. Sarah Bennett, a name he hadn't heard in 7 years, not since the night she disappeared from his casino without saying goodbye. The only woman who ever left his world without being buried in it. "I have 36 hours, Emma continued, her voice breaking slightly, "before Agent Richard Frost takes me into custody and sends me to a place where children never come back." Alexandra's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. Someone get this child out." "Quiet," Michael growled without turning. His voice was ice. Alexandra flinched. Emma took another step forward. "Mom said he'd be here today, that he'd recognize her name, that he would protect me." James Reynolds moved first, positioning himself between Michael and the girl. "Lower the gun, kid." "Not until someone tells me the truth," Emma snapped, taking another step forward despite the pistol's weight pulling at her small arms. "Mom said one of you would know." Nathan Carter was already on his feet. So was James. Emma reached into her coat pocket with her left hand, her right still holding the gun. She pulled out a folded photograph and tossed it onto the marble floor. It slid across the aisle until it stopped at Michael's polished leather shoes. He bent down and picked it up. New Year's Eve, 7 years ago. His private casino lounge. Sarah in a red cocktail dress, laughing. Michael on her left, James on her right. Nathan behind them, arm draped over her shoulder. All of them smiling, champagne in hand. Michael clenched the photo, his knuckles whitening. From the front row, Nathan exhaled audibly. James's eyes narrowed. "Mom wouldn't tell me who," Emma said, the gun still raised. "She said it would get her killed, but she gave me that picture and told me the man who loved her once would know." The cathedral remained silent, hundreds of witnesses frozen in disbelief at the drama unfolding before them. Where is she now? James asked, his voice softer than usual. St. Luke's Hospital, room 412, Emma replied. Coma, fractured ribs, skull trauma. Her small jaw tightened. Agent Frost pushed her down a flight of stairs when she wouldn't sign the papers. She's not expected to wake up. That name. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Alexandra took a step back from Michael, reading something in his posture that frightened her. This is ridiculous, Alexandra hissed. Michael, we have 2 senators and a federal judge watching this circus. Michael ignored her, his focus entirely on the child. How do you know Frost pushed her? I saw him. Emma's voice trembled for the first time. I was hiding under the stairs. He said if she didn't give him what he wanted, he'd make sure I disappeared into the system. A special program he runs. Nathan stepped into the aisle now, moving slowly. What program, Emma? The Federal Youth Placement Initiative, she said, pronouncing each word carefully as if she'd memorized them. Mom said it's not real. It's how they move children. Sell them. Several gasps escaped from the assembled guests. Michael's jaw muscle twitched, the only sign of the rage building within him. Emma, Michael said, his voice controlled. How did you find me? Mom knew about the wedding. She said it would be in the papers, that all of Chicago's elite would be here. Emma's arms were shaking more noticeably now, the gun becoming heavier by the second. She said if anything happened to her, I should come here, find Michael Kingston. Alexandra laughed bitterly. This is obviously some kind of extortion scheme. Be quiet, Michael said, his tone dangerously soft. He kept his eyes on Emma. Who taught you to hold that gun? My mom, Emma answered. Michael nodded once. She did a good job. Emma's eyes welled with tears. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, she said. I just didn't know where else to go. Michael took a step forward, then another. James tensed, but didn't interfere. Michael stopped just out of reach, then crouched down to Emma's eye level. I'm not afraid of you, Emma whispered, though her arms trembled violently now. I know, Michael said quietly, but that gun is heavy. May I take it? She hesitated, then spoke with a wisdom beyond her years. I don't care if you're mine by blood, she said. I care if you'll stop him, if you'll keep me alive. A pause, then Michael extended his hand. You have my word, he said. You're safe now. The cathedral was so silent that the sound of snow hitting the stained glass windows was audible. Alexandra let out a disbelieving laugh. You can't be serious, she said. This is our wedding. Michael didn't take his eyes off Emma. No, he said. It was. Emma finally lowered the gun, placing it carefully in Michael's outstretched hand. For the briefest moment, something like relief crossed her features. That was when the siren started. Low at first, distant, then louder, closer, multiple vehicles approaching rapidly through the snowy streets. James went to the stained glass windows. 3 unmarked vehicles, tactical approach. He found me, Emma whispered, genuine fear crossing her face for the first time. Agent Frost. He put a GPS tracker in my coat. I didn't know. Michael took the phone from her coat pocket and crushed it beneath his heel. Too late, he muttered. They're surrounding the perimeter, James reported, his military training evident in his assessment. Then the doors opened a second time. A tall man stepped through, snow dusting the shoulders of his impeccable suit. His badge gleamed on his belt, and his smile never reached his eyes. Behind him, men in tactical gear took positions at the entrance. Hello, Emma, he said with practiced warmth. Time to come home. Emma stepped behind Michael. I'm not going anywhere with him. Michael's hand drifted toward his waistband, where James knew he kept a concealed Sig Sauer. She's under my guardianship, Frost said smoothly, producing a document from his inner pocket. Legal paperwork, certified custody. Her mother gave it to me before her accident. You mean before you tried to kill her? James snapped. Frost's smile tightened. Serious allegations require serious evidence, Mr. Reynolds. You got proof? A low voice answered from the front pew. All eyes turned. Nathan Carter stood, his hand resting casually on the pew in front of him, but his posture was anything but casual. She's mine, he said. Michael stared at his friend, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. I want to test, Nathan continued, eyes never leaving Frost. But she's not leaving with that man. Frost narrowed his eyes. You have no legal authority here, Mr. Carter. She's in danger, Michael cut in. That's all I need to know. The cathedral had become a chessboard, with Emma as the piece everyone wanted to control. The wedding guests watched in stone-bound silence, no one daring to interfere. Emma, Frost said, his voice hardening. Let's go. Now. She's not going anywhere, said a new voice. A woman in hospital scrubs stepped into the aisle from a side entrance, her face tired but determined. The cathedral's attention swiveled once more. I'm Dr. Carrington, she said. Sarah Bennett is awake. She's alert, and she's ready to testify about who pushed her down those stairs. Frost's composed exterior cracked for just an instant, a flash of cold calculation crossing his features. That's impossible, he said. I spoke with her physicians less than an hour ago. Her condition changed, Dr. Carrington replied, and the first thing she did was name you Agent Frost. Michael stepped forward, placing his body between Emma and Frost. Then we start protecting this family right now. The tension in the cathedral was unbearable. Wedding guests began to shift uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing something far darker than a wedding interruption. Senator Vance stepped forward. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, he suggested, ever the politician. Clear the cathedral. Michael nodded to James, who began directing security to escort guests out. Alexandra stood frozen, her perfect day shattered, her carefully constructed image of Michael Kingston unraveling before her eyes. Michael, she hissed, what is happening? He finally turned to look at her, and she recoiled from the coldness in his gaze. Go with your father, Alexandra, he said quietly. We're supposed to be getting married. No, Michael said. We're done. Fury and humiliation flooded her face. She ripped off her veil and stormed down the aisle, her father hurrying after her. The cathedral emptied rapidly, leaving only the key players in this unfolding drama. Frost remained by the entrance, his men flanking him. This doesn't end here, Kingston, he said. That girl is federal business. That girl, Michael replied, is under my protection now. Emma stood close to Michael, her small hand finding its way into his. The simple gesture of trust stirred something long dormant in Michael Kingston's chest. Nathan approached them, his voice low. We need to get her somewhere safe. Now. My estate, Michael said, full of security protocol. James nodded, already on his phone, issuing commands to the Kingston security team. Dr. Carrington stepped closer. Ms. Bennett asked me to find her daughter, she explained. She woke up 30 minutes ago, disoriented but lucid. When she heard Emma had gone to find you, she sent me immediately. Thank you, Michael said. Can she be moved? Dr. Carrington shook her head. Not yet, but she's stable. I've arranged private security for her room. Double it, Michael ordered. No one enters without clearance. Frost watched this exchange with cold calculation. This is obstruction of justice. No, Michael replied. This is the beginning of justice. He turned to Emma, whose exhaustion was finally showing through her brave facade. We're leaving now. Stay close to me. Emma nodded, the adrenaline that had carried her this far beginning to ebb. Michael removed his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her tiny frame, but she clutched it gratefully. My men will escort Agent Frost and his team from the premises, James said, the implied threat clear in his tone. I'll be seeing you soon, Kingston, Frost said, his voice carrying dangerous promise. All of you. He backed out slowly, his tactical team following his lead. As the cathedral doors closed behind them, Emma sagged against Michael's side. I did it, she whispered. I found you. Michael lifted her into his arms without a word, her slight weight a reminder of how young and vulnerable she truly was. She laid her head on his shoulder, spent from her ordeal. We take the back exit, James advised. Cars waiting. The snow had intensified outside, blanketing the city in white silence. Through a side door, they emerged into the cathedral garden, now a winter wonderland of snow-laden trees and frozen fountains. Michael carried Emma, while James and Nathan flanked them, alert for any threat. Dr. Carrington followed, already on her phone coordinating with the hospital. A black Escalade with tinted windows waited at the garden gate, engine running. The driver, one of Michael's most trusted security personnel, nodded once as they approached. Kingston Estate, Michael instructed as they climbed inside. Full lockdown protocol. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, snow crunching beneath its tires. Emma, still wrapped in Michael's oversized jacket, stared out the window at the falling snow. "He'll come for me," she said softly. "Let him try," Michael replied. 20 minutes later, they passed through the imposing gates of the Kingston estate, a sprawling mansion set on 10 acres of lakefront property. Security personnel were already visible, patrolling the perimeter despite the weather. The house itself was a fortress disguised as luxury, bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, and a state-of-the-art security system that would make most government facilities envious. Inside, the warmth was immediate: rich mahogany paneling, Persian rugs, and the subtle scent of oak and expensive scotch. Michael carried Emma into his study and set her down gently in a leather chair that dwarfed her small frame. Her feet dangled, not touching the ground. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded hesitantly. "I'll have something brought," Michael said, picking up a phone on his desk. While he spoke quietly into the receiver, James examined the gun Emma had brought. 9mm Glock, he observed, loaded but safety on. "Sarah taught her well," Nathan remarked, mixing a drink at the bar cart. "Always did have good instincts." Michael hung up the phone and turned to Emma. "Food will be here soon," he said. Then after a pause, "You've been very brave, Emma." She looked up at him with those startling blue eyes. "Mom said I had to be. She said no one else would fight for me." The words hung heavy in the air. Michael sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." Emma took a deep breath. "Mom never told me who my father was. Not once. But she kept your photo." She pointed to the old photograph now lying on the desk between them. "She used to look at it when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes she'd cry." Michael's expression remained neutral, but his hands clasped together tightly. "What about Agent Frost?" Nathan asked, sitting down with his scotch. "How did he come into the picture?" Emma's voice grew smaller. "He started coming around 6 months ago. Said he could help Mom get new papers, a fresh start. At first he was nice, brought food, helped with bills. Then he started asking questions about who she used to work for, about a ledger." Michael and James exchanged a sharp glance. The ledger, the one that had vanished the same week Sarah disappeared. Names, transactions, wire transfers, everything that could have implicated Kingston Enterprises in dozens of financial crimes. Never recovered. "She never gave it to him," Emma continued. "So he started getting mean. Called her names. Told her if she didn't cooperate, he'd take me. Said nobody would protect her." She faltered. "It's okay," Michael said gently. "You can say it." Emma looked down at her hands. "A bastard child of a criminal whore." She recited the words without emotion, as if repeating something she'd heard many times. Michael stood abruptly, turning to face the fireplace. No one stopped him or spoke. They knew his temper needed a moment to cool. "When did your mother get hurt?" James asked, keeping his tone professional. 3 days ago, Emma said. "Agent Frost came with papers. Said I had to go with him to a special school while Mom was being investigated. She refused to sign. They fought. I was hiding in the stairwell. He pushed her when she tried to call for help. She fell down the whole flight." Emma's voice trembled. "There was so much blood." A knock at the door interrupted her. Michael's housekeeper entered with a tray of food, a grilled cheese sandwich, tomato soup, and a glass of milk. She set it on the coffee table in front of Emma, her eyes curious but professional enough not to ask questions. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins," Michael said. "That will be all for now." When the door closed again, Emma picked up half the sandwich but didn't eat. "After Mom fell, I ran to Mrs. Garcia next door. She called the ambulance. Agent Frost told the paramedics Mom tripped, that he was a family friend. They believed him." "Of course they did," Nathan muttered. "Badge goes a long way." Emma continued, "At the hospital, he tried to get me to go with him. Said he had emergency custody papers. I ran away while he was talking to the doctors. Mom had told me what to do if something bad happened. She gave me the gun, the picture, and your address. Said to find you at the wedding." "And she told you to say what exactly?" Michael asked, turning back from the fireplace. Emma met his gaze. "Look him in the eye and say, 'You're my dad, aren't you?'" Michael didn't flinch, but his hand resting on the mantelpiece curled into a fist. Nathan cleared his throat. "She remembered the date of the wedding. It was in the Tribune, James said. Society pages. Big spread last Sunday. Emma finally took a bite of her sandwich, hunger overcoming her hesitation. Michael watched her eat, his mind clearly racing through implications and scenarios. This isn't just about you or your mother, he said finally. Frost isn't operating alone. The guest list today included 2 senators, 3 judges, and the state attorney general. The fact that he came there means he's protected. He has paperwork, Emma reminded them between bites. He said Mom signed over emergency custody to him before she fell. She was in a coma, James growled. What kind of judge certifies that? A corrupt one, Nathan replied. Michael turned to Emma. Did your mother give you anything else? Anything at all? Emma finished her milk, then reached into her sock and pulled out a flash drive. She said if I got to you alive, to give you this. Michael took it, examining the small device before inserting it into his encrypted laptop. A file opened. Video recordings, dozens of them. Hidden camera footage of Frost threatening nurses, financial logs from the supposed group homes, men in suits escorting children through back hallways, a crime ring operating in plain sight. And Sarah, off-screen but speaking, if anything happens to me, it's because of what I know, and because I wouldn't give my daughter to monsters. Michael closed the laptop. James, double the security. Nathan, check every connection Frost has used. Bank accounts, properties, associates. He turned back to Emma, who had finished eating and was fighting to keep her eyes open. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard. You're staying here, Michael said. You'll have protection, food, anything you need. What if he comes back? She asked, fear creeping back into her voice. He said he would. Michael crouched beside her chair. He will, he said, but next time he won't walk out. A knock at the door. It was Mrs. Collins again. Sir, there is someone from the courthouse here. Says it's urgent. Michael nodded and she showed a nervous-looking young man clutching a sealed envelope. Mr. Kingston, he stammered. Roger Dawkins from Judge Meyer's office. I was told to deliver this directly to you. Michael took the envelope and dismissed him with a nod. Inside was a court order, signed by Judge Meyer himself. Full emergency guardianship of Emma Bennett granted to Agent Richard Frost, effective immediately. The paperwork had been filed 1 hour before the wedding. Son of a bitch, James muttered, reading over Michael's shoulder. He's coming back, Nathan said, with backup. Michael looked at Emma, who had finally lost her battle with exhaustion. She was curled up in the massive leather chair, fast asleep, Michael's suit jacket still wrapped around her tiny frame. We'll be ready, Michael said quietly. For the first time since the wedding, the room fell silent. The 3 men watched the sleeping child, each lost in their own thoughts about Sarah Bennett and the night 7 years ago that had apparently changed all their lives. Do you think it's you? Nathan finally asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his collar and pulled out a thin silver chain. At the end of it hung a hospital bracelet, worn and faded. Sarah's name, room 204. He'd visited once 7 years ago, never told a soul. I think I've always known, he said softly. Outside, snow continued to fall over Chicago, covering the city in a deceptive blanket of peace. Inside the Kingston estate, a war council had formed, centered around a sleeping 5-year-old girl who had walked into a cathedral with a loaded gun and changed everything. Emma Bennett had come looking for a father. What she'd found was an army. Michael Kingston's study reeked of cigars and war. The cathedral had emptied an hour ago, guests escorted out by men in sharp suits who spoke through earpieces and never smiled. The storm outside had intensified, pelting the bulletproof windows with snow that collected in the corners like silent sentries. Inside, the fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast a small animal, casting long shadows across antique Persian rugs worth more than most family homes. Alexandra was gone, her designer heels echoing down the marble steps as she left in her father's armored sedan. No goodbye, no protest, just silence and shame. Now it was just the inner circle. Michael, James, Nathan, and the little girl who had upended it all. Emma slept on the leather couch, her small body curled beneath a cashmere throw that Mrs. Collins had thoughtfully provided. The gun she had carried into the cathedral lay disassembled on Michael's desk, examined and cleared by James with professional precision. None of them had suggested calling child services. None of them had suggested calling the police. In their world, such institutions were tools to be wielded, not authorities to be respected. She's exhausted, Nathan observed quietly, nursing a glass of 30-year-old scotch. Poor kid's been through hell. James stood by the window, his military-trained eyes scanning the property perimeter where security personnel patrolled in the snow. Frost's men pulled back, 2 blocks north and east. They're watching, not advancing. Michael sat behind his mahogany desk, face illuminated by the glow of his laptop as he examined the contents of the flash drive Emma had delivered. His expression darkened with each video, each document. A shadow moved across his features as he watched footage of children being loaded into unmarked vans. "This goes deeper than Frost," he said finally. "These facilities have federal funding, private contractors, shell companies." He paused on a financial spreadsheet. There, Kingston Capital Partners is listed as an investor in one of the shell corporations. Nathan moved around the desk to look. "We don't have any holdings by that name." "Exactly." Michael's voice was ice. "Someone's using variations of my companies to hide their involvement." James turned from the window. "Alexandra's family has government contracts for juvenile detention facilities. 7 states." The implication hung heavy in the air. Michael closed the laptop, unwilling to view more atrocities with Emma sleeping nearby. He studied her face, peaceful in slumber, searching for resemblances to himself, to Nathan, to James, to Sarah. Who had she inherited those striking blue eyes from? That determined chin? "Do you know what you've done?" James asked, not unkindly, but not gently either. "You didn't just crash a wedding, boss. You lit a match in a room full of gasoline." "I know exactly what I've done," Michael replied, "and I'd do it again." Emma stirred, her eyelids fluttering. She sat up slowly, momentarily confused by her surroundings. Recognition dawned in her eyes when she saw Michael. "How long was I asleep?" "About 2 hours," Nathan answered. "You needed it." She rubbed her eyes, shoulders tense as she assessed her situation. "Agent Frost?" "Still out there," James confirmed, "but he can't get to you here." Emma nodded, accepting this assurance with the fragile faith of a child who had learned that adults weren't always truthful. She pulled the cashmere throw around her shoulders and sat up straighter, trying to appear older and more composed than her 5 years. "Are you hungry again?" Michael asked. "Mrs. Collins can bring something." "No, thank you," Emma replied with surprising politeness. Then, without preamble, "Are we going to see my mom now?" Michael exchanged glances with Nathan and James. "Soon," he promised. "But first, I need you to tell us more. Everything you know about your mother, about Frost, about the ledger." Emma studied him, her gaze unnervingly direct. "Mom said you might ask about that. She said it was her insurance policy." "Insurance against what?" Nathan prompted. "Against people who might want to hurt us." Emma looked down at her hands. "She kept it hidden. She moved it every few months, different places." Michael leaned forward. "Emma, that ledger contains information that could hurt a lot of powerful people, including me." "I know," Emma replied simply. "Mom said it was your sins written in ink." The 3 men fell silent, absorbing the child's frank assessment. Michael didn't flinch from her gaze. "Your mother was right." "Is that why you helped me?" Emma asked. "Because of the ledger?" "No," Michael said firmly. "I helped you because you needed help. Because Sarah asked me to protect you." He paused. "And because you might be my daughter." Emma nodded, accepting this complex truth with surprising maturity. "Mom never told me who my father was, not once, but she kept your photo. That one." She pointed to the old frame now lying on the table between them. "She used to look at it when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes she'd cry, other times she'd whisper to it." "What did she say?" Nathan asked gently. "She'd say, 'I should have told you.'" Emma's voice was small but clear. "But she never said which one of you she was talking to." Michael stood and walked to the bar cart, pouring himself a scotch he didn't drink. "Start from the beginning, Emma. Tell us about your life with Sarah, where you lived, what she did." Emma settled back into the couch. "We moved a lot. Different cities. Mom worked as a waitress, sometimes in offices. She homeschooled me because she said regular schools asked too many questions." She looked up at Michael. "She taught me how to read when I was 3. She said I was smart like my father. And Frost? James prompted. When did he first appear? 6 months ago, Emma replied. We were living in Milwaukee. He came to the diner where Mom worked. At first he was nice, brought me books, helped Mom with money when we were behind on rent. How did he find her? Michael asked. Emma shrugged. Mom never said, but after he started coming around, she got scared. She started teaching me things, how to use a phone, how to hide, how to fire a gun. Nathan raised an eyebrow. She taught you well. She said I might need to protect myself someday. Emma's voice wavered slightly. She was right. Michael returned to his desk, setting down his untouched drink. What did Frost want from your mother? The ledger at first, Emma said, but then he started asking about something else, a key. Michael and James exchanged glances. What key? Michael asked carefully. I don't know, Emma admitted, but Mom got really scared when he mentioned it. We moved to Chicago the next day. She said we needed to be closer to you in case something happened. The pieces were beginning to form a disturbing picture. Sarah had run 7 years ago, taking with her evidence of Kingston's illicit operations. But she'd remained in hiding until recently, only emerging when a greater threat appeared. Emma, Michael said gently, did your mother give you anything else? Anything at all besides the gun, the flash drive, and the photograph? The little girl hesitated. She gave me something to remember if I ever met you. A number. She made me memorize it, said never to write it down. What number? Michael urged. 204-157-893, Emma recited without hesitation. Nathan was already typing on his phone. Safety deposit box, he murmured. First National Trust, downtown branch. The ledger, James concluded. Michael stood. James, bring the car around. Nathan, call your contact at First National. We need access immediately. What about me? Emma asked, suddenly anxious. Are you leaving me here? Michael looked at her, the child who had crashed into his life with the force of a hurricane, bearing secrets and accusations and possibly his own blood. Leaving her behind was the sensible choice, the safe choice, the choice the old Michael Kingston would have made without hesitation. No, he said firmly, you're coming with us. I promise to protect you, and I can't do that if you're not with me. Relief flooded her small features. I'll be good, she promised. I won't get in the way. I know you won't, Michael said. Go with Mrs. Collins. She'll help you get cleaned up and find warmer clothes. As Emma left the room with the housekeeper, Nathan approached Michael. Are you sure about this? Taking her into the field? No, Michael admitted, but I'm less sure about leaving her here. If Alexandra was involved with Frost, she knows this property, its weaknesses. James nodded in agreement. Better to keep the package close. She's not a package, Michael corrected sharply. She's a child, possibly my child. The words hung in the air, changing the dynamic between the three men who had stood shoulder to shoulder through decades of business deals and bloodshed. If Emma was Michael's daughter, what did that mean for the empire he had built? For the succession plans they had all assumed would unfold differently? We should consider the possibility that she belongs to one of us, Nathan said carefully. Sarah was with all of us that winter. James nodded. We were all with her at different times, all three of us. Michael's expression hardened. Does it matter? She's being hunted. She needs protection. The Danae can wait. It matters, Nathan insisted, because whoever put her in danger will pay with their life. And I want to know if I'm killing for my own blood. The brutal honesty silenced the room. These men hadn't built their empire with half measures or moral qualms. They had fought and killed and manipulated their way to the top of Chicago's power structure. Now a little girl had introduced a variable none of them had prepared for, paternal instinct. Their contemplation was interrupted by Mrs. Collins's return. Sir, Miss Emma is ready. The child who stepped into the room looked transformed. Gone were the oversized coat and scuffed sneakers. In their place, a charcoal gray wool coat that Mrs. Collins had ingeniously altered to fit her small frame, and new boots suitable for the winter weather. Her blonde curls had been brushed and secured with a simple clip, and her face washed clean of the tears and exhaustion that had marked it earlier. She looked like she belonged in Michael Kingston's world. The thought unsettled him. Better? Emma asked, seeking approval. Much better, Michael confirmed. Are you ready to go? She nodded, her gaze solemn. To the bank? First to the hospital, Michael corrected, to see your mother. Hope flickered across Emma's face. Really? Really, then we'll retrieve what she hid for us. The Kingston convoy departed 15 minutes later, three black SUVs cutting through the snowstorm that had brought Chicago to a standstill. Emma sat beside Michael in the lead vehicle, her face pressed to the window watching the snowflakes dance in the headlights. James drove, his eyes constantly scanning for tails or ambushes. Nathan followed in the second vehicle with 4 security personnel. St. Luke's Hospital rose from the snowy landscape like a fortress of light, its windows illuminating the darkness. The emergency entrance bustled with activity as ambulance crews battled the weather to deliver patients. Michael's security team created a protective formation as they escorted Emma through a service entrance, avoiding the public areas where Frost might have positioned observers. Dr. Carrington met them on the 4th floor, her expression grave. Ms. Bennett is stable but weak, she reported. She's been asking for Emma. Is she in danger? Michael asked. Medically, she's improving, Dr. Carrington replied, but I've stationed 2 security guards outside her room as you requested. There have already been 2 attempts by individuals claiming to be federal agents to access her. Frost, James muttered. Dr. Carrington nodded. I've restricted access to essential medical personnel only. Your name has been added to the approved list, Mr. Kingston, along with Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Carter. Thank you, Michael said. He turned to Emma. Are you ready to see your mom? Emma nodded, clutching Michael's hand tighter. Dr. Carrington led them down the corridor to room 412, nodding to the private security guards who flanked the door. They recognized Kingston immediately and stepped aside. St. Luke's Hospital had seen its fair share of blood and betrayal, but nothing quite like the reunion waiting in room 412. Sarah Bennett lay against crisp white pillows, her dark hair matted to one side, bruises mottling her collarbone. Her left eye was still swollen, and an IV drip fed pain medication into her veins. But her voice, though raspy and cracked, was clear when she spoke. I told you I'd find you, she whispered, lips curling in a faint smile as Emma appeared in the doorway. Emma stood frozen for a moment, tears welling in her eyes. For days she had spoken of her mother in past tense, had prepared herself to become an orphan. Now here she was, damaged but breathing. Mama, Emma whispered, her composure finally breaking. Sarah opened her arms, and Emma ran into them, bearing her face in the hospital gown. Her tears flowed silently down the same cheeks that had glared down a cathedral full of Chicago's elite hours earlier. Michael stood back, hands in his pockets, watching something sacred unfold. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, murmuring reassurances that everything would be all right now, that they were safe, that she wasn't going anywhere. When Emma's tears subsided, Sarah looked up at Michael. Their eyes locked across the sterile hospital room, 7 years of silence compressing into a single breath. Neither spoke immediately, the weight of their shared past and complicated present filling the space between them. She was a soldier, Michael finally said, nodding toward Emma. So were you, Sarah replied, her voice stronger than it appeared possible given her injuries. Coming for her like that, Michael stepped closer to the bed. She gave us the number, Sarah, the safety deposit box. Sarah tensed visibly. You haven't gone yet? We came here first, Michael said. I thought you might want to tell me yourself what I'll find there. Sarah looked down at Emma, who had nestled against her side, unwilling to let go. It's the ledger, she confirmed. And more. The key Frost was looking for? Nathan asked from the doorway. Sarah's eyes widened slightly at his presence. Nathan, and James too, I see. The whole cavalry. We need to know what we're dealing with, Sarah, James said, his tone gentle but firm. Frost isn't giving up. He's got court orders, federal backing. He's got nothing, Sarah spat, her venom surprising in her weakened state. Everything he's built is based on lies and trafficking. The evidence in that box will destroy him and everyone connected to him. Michael studied her face, searching for the truth behind her words. Sarah had been his financial controller for 3 years before she disappeared. She knew every transaction, every shell company, every bribe and kickback. She had been brilliant, meticulous, and ultimately dangerous when she fled with that knowledge. Why now, Michael asked. You've been hiding for 7 years. Why risk everything by sending Emma to find me now? Sarah's gaze hardened. Because they found us, Michael. Frost isn't just some corrupt agent. He's part of a network that uses the federal foster system to traffic children. He discovered Emma existed, discovered she might be connected to you. He's been hunting us for months. The ledger would have protected you, James observed. Why not use it as leverage earlier? Because it doesn't just implicate Frost in his operation, Sarah replied. It implicates people in your organization too, people close to you. The room fell silent. Emma looked between the adults, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Who? Michael demanded. Sarah stroked Emma's hair, buying time before answering. The box contains everything. Names, dates, transactions, including who helped Frost track me down. Alexandra, Nathan guessed. Sarah nodded once. Among others. Michael's jaw tightened. How long have you known? I suspected when I saw the engagement announcement 3 months ago, Sarah admitted. Alexandra Vance has been connected to these trafficking operations for years through her father's correctional facility contracts. When I saw she was marrying you, I knew it wasn't coincidence. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. He had been played, used as a pawn in a larger game. Alexandra's insistence on a high-profile wedding suddenly made sense. It wasn't about social standing. It was about access to his empire, his connections, his resources. Emma knows where to find the key, Sarah continued, looking down at her daughter. Don't you, sweetheart? Emma nodded solemnly. It's not just a regular key, Sarah explained. It's a secure server access key, digital. It unlocks encrypted files that document every transaction, every child, every corrupt official in their network. She winced as pain shot through her ribs, including evidence connecting Alexandra's family directly to the operation. Michael processed this information, his strategic mind already formulating plans and counterplans. That's why Frost was so desperate to get Emma. She's the only other person who knows how to access these files. Yes, Sarah confirmed. I taught her the access sequence, disguised it as a game. She has perfect recall. Michael looked at Emma with newfound understanding. This child hadn't just crashed his wedding on a desperate whim. She was the linchpin in a plan Sarah had been cultivating for years. A failsafe in case something happened to her. We need to move, James urged. If Frost realizes we're connecting these dots, he'll accelerate his timeline. Michael nodded in agreement. Sarah, we're taking Emma to retrieve the ledger and key, then we're bringing her back here under guard. No, Sarah said, struggling to sit upright. It's not safe. Frost has people inside the hospital. He'll try again. Where then? Nathan asked. The safe house in Lake Forest, Michael decided. Off the books, not connected to any Kingston property. Sarah relaxed slightly. Smart. Michael turned to Emma. We need to go now. Are you ready? Emma looked torn, unwilling to leave her mother so soon after finding her again. Sarah cupped her daughter's face in her hands. It's okay, baby. Go with Michael. He'll protect you. I'll see you soon. Promise? Emma whispered. Promise, Sarah affirmed. Now you need to be brave a little longer. Emma nodded, sliding reluctantly from her mother's bed. She straightened her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of Michael that Nathan and James exchanged meaningful glances. As they prepared to leave, Sarah called out, Michael! He turned back. There's something else you should know. Michael stepped closer to her bed, leaning down to hear her weakened voice. I had the test done years ago, she whispered. I know who her father is. Michael's breath caught. Who? Sarah's eyes held his. The box contains those results too, but I think you already know the answer. Before Michael could press further, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. Emergency lights flashed in the corridor outside. Security breach, James reported after checking his phone. Multiple armed men entering through the West Wing. Hospitals initiating lockdown. Frost, Sarah gasped, fear crossing her face for the first time. He's coming for Emma. Michael's decision was instant. Change of planes. Sarah comes with us. Now. Dr. Carrington appeared in the doorway, breathless. You need to move. Men with federal badges are checking rooms floor by floor. They have a court order for both Ms. Bennett and the child. Can she be transported? Michael demanded, indicating Sarah's condition. Not ideally, Dr. Carrington admitted, but staying would be worse. Nathan was already disconnecting Sarah's IV while James coordinated with security through his earpiece. Michael lifted Sarah from the bed as gently as possible, ignoring her gasp of pain. Emma watched with wide eyes as her mother was bundled into a wheelchair, a hospital blanket thrown over her legs. "Service elevator," Dr. Carrington instructed, leading them into the hallway. "I'll create a diversion at the nurses' station." The small party moved swiftly down the corridor, away from the commotion echoing from the main hospital wing. Sarah gripped the wheelchair arms, fighting waves of pain as they navigated turns and doorways. Emma kept pace beside Michael, her face set in determined focus. The service elevator opened onto a loading dock where kitchen supplies and laundry were delivered. James's security team had the exit secured, their vehicles idling in the ambulance bay beyond. "We're exposed here," Nathan warned as they emerged into the snowstorm. "No cover." Michael surveyed the open space between them and the waiting SUVs. "Too late to change course. Move fast, stay tight." He wheeled Sarah through the accumulating snow, her hospital gown inadequate against the bitter cold. Emma hurried alongside, her small boots leaving delicate impressions next to the wheelchair's deeper tracks. They had made it halfway to the vehicles when the first shots rang out. "Down!" James shouted, drawing his weapon and returning fire toward a dark figure at the corner of the building. Michael shielded Emma with his body while Nathan took control of Sarah's wheelchair, propelling her forward through the deepening snow. Security personnel created a protective formation around them, their training evident in their coordinated response. More shots echoed across the parking area, bullets pinging off metal and concrete. Emma remained silent, her only reaction a tightening of her grip on Michael's coat. This wasn't her first firefight, he realized with a mixture of sadness and admiration. Sarah had prepared her daughter for this hell. They reached the lead SUV in a chaotic rush. Nathan helped transfer Sarah from the wheelchair to the vehicle's interior, while Michael lifted Emma into the back seat. James provided cover fire, forcing their attackers to keep their distance. "Go," James shouted as he dove into the passenger seat. "I'll direct the team to rendezvous at the secondary location." The SUV lurched forward, snow spinning beneath its tires as Nathan accelerated away from the hospital. Michael crouched in the back seat, positioning himself between Emma and the rear window. Sarah lay across the third row, her breathing labored from the exertion and pain. "Is everyone okay?" Michael asked, checking Emma for injuries. She nodded, her expression remarkably composed for a child who had just endured gunfire. "Will they follow us?" "They'll try," Nathan confirmed, executing a sharp turn onto a side street. "But we have contingencies." Indeed, 2 blocks from the hospital, they pulled into an underground parking garage where an identical SUV waited. Within 3 minutes, they had transferred to the clean vehicle and were back on the road, heading in a different direction while their original transport served as a decoy. The snowstorm provided additional cover, reducing visibility and hampering pursuit. Nathan navigated through Chicago's grid with the confidence of someone who had planned escape routes from every major building in the city, which in fact he had. "First National Trust," Michael directed. "We need what's in that box before we go to ground." "Is that wise?" James questioned. "Frost will have people watching the bank." "He doesn't know about the box," Sarah spoke up from the back, her voice strained. "He knew I had evidence, but not where. That's why he needed Emma." Michael nodded. "We go to the bank, quick in and out. Then we disappear." The drive to First National Trust took 20 minutes through snow-choked streets. The financial district stood eerily quiet, most businesses closed due to the weather. The bank itself was technically closed, but Nathan's call ahead had ensured a manager would meet them at the side entrance. "Wait here," Michael instructed Sarah. "James, stay with her." "I want to come," Emma insisted. Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close to me." The bank manager, a nervous man named Winters, who had done business with Kingston Enterprises for years, met them at the private client entrance. "Mr. Kingston," he greeted, eyes widening slightly at the sight of Emma. "Everything is prepared as requested." The safety deposit vault lay 3 levels below street level, a fortress of steel and concrete. Emma's small hand remained firmly in Michael's as they descended in a private elevator, her eyes taking in the security cameras and armed guards with practiced assessment. "The box you requested is ready in the private viewing room," Winters informed them as the elevator doors opened. "I'll need your signature and verification code." Michael completed the necessary formalities while Emma watched silently. When they were finally left alone in the viewing room with the rectangular metal box, Michael turned to her. "Do you know what to do?" he asked. Emma nodded, approaching the box with solemn purpose. "Mom said it needs two keys, the physical one and the code only I know." Michael inserted the key he'd been given and turned it. A digital keypad illuminated on the front of the box. Emma stepped forward and entered a sequence of numbers without hesitation. The lock clicked, and the lid released with a pneumatic hiss. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope. Michael removed each item carefully, examining them before placing them in a secure briefcase he'd brought for this purpose. "Is that it?" Emma asked, peering into the box. "One more thing," Michael said, finding a small velvet pouch at the bottom. He opened it to reveal a delicate silver locket on a chain. "This was your mother's." Emma's eyes widened in recognition. "She used to wear it every day. Then it disappeared." Michael handed it to her. "It's yours now." Emma opened the locket to reveal a tiny photograph inside, herself as an infant, cradled in Sarah's arms. On the opposite side, a microscopic engraving, "Blood of Mine." The moment of quiet contemplation was shattered by a text alert on Michael's phone. A message from James. "Move now, compromise." Michael secured the briefcase and took Emma's hand. "We need to go. Quickly." They bypassed the elevator, taking emergency stairs up toward the side entrance. Michael's security training kicked in as he assessed each landing before proceeding, Emma keeping pace without complaint. They emerged into the bank's main floor to find it eerily silent. The manager who had greeted them was nowhere to be seen. Michael's instincts screamed danger. "New exit," he murmured to Emma, changing direction toward a staff door that would lead to the building's rear service area. They were halfway across the marble floor when the main door shattered and men in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised. "Federal agents, freeze!" Michael pulled Emma behind a marble column, assessing their options. 3 armed men at the front entrance. Unknown number at other exits. Emma pressed against him, her breathing quick but controlled. "There's another way," she whispered urgently. "Mom showed me. For emergencies." Michael looked down at her in surprise. "What?" "The banks connect underground," Emma explained hurriedly. "Service tunnels. Mom brought me here before. She showed me." Michael made a split-second decision to trust the child's knowledge. "Lead the way." Emma tugged his hand, pulling him toward an unmarked door behind the teller stations. It opened to reveal a utility corridor, while shouts echoed behind them. The door locked automatically as it closed, buying them precious seconds. Emma navigated the service passages with uncanny familiarity, turning left, then right, then down a stairwell that led deeper beneath the financial district. Michael kept pace, impressed and unsettled by how well Sarah had prepared her daughter for this eventuality. "Almost there," Emma assured him as they reached a heavy fire door. "This leads to the building next door. They won't expect that." The door opened onto another utility corridor, this one belonging to the adjacent office tower. Emma led them to a service elevator that carried them to the ground floor. From there, they slipped out a loading dock entrance into an alley behind the building. Nathan was waiting with the SUV, having received Michael's urgent text with their new extraction point. They climbed in quickly, the vehicle already moving before the doors fully closed. "James and Sarah," Michael demanded. "Already en route to the safe house," Nathan reported, navigating through back streets to avoid main thoroughfares. They switched vehicles again. Clean transport. Michael checked the briefcase, ensuring that her precious cargo was secure. Emma sat beside him, the silver locket now hanging around her neck. Her face showed fatigue, but also the pride of having successfully executed her part of the escape. "You did well," Michael told her. "Your mother taught you thoroughly." "She said knowledge is the best weapon," Emma replied. "Better than guns." Michael nodded, thinking of the ledger now in his possession. "She's right." The snowstorm had intensified, turning Chicago's skyline into a blur of lights and shadows. Nathan drove with practiced skill, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. Emma eventually dozed off, the exhaustion of the day's events finally catching up with her. When they arrived at the Lake Forest safe house 3 hours later, it was past midnight. The property sat on 2 secluded acres, surrounded by trees now heavy with snow. No neighbors within sight. No obvious approach except the private drive, which security personnel monitored from camouflaged positions. James met them at the door, his expression grim. "Sarah's resting. Doctor arrived 30 minutes ago. Says she needs proper medical care, but he's made her comfortable for now. Michael carried the sleeping Emma inside. The safe house was modestly furnished but secure, bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, surveillance systems covering every approach. A safe room occupied the center of the structure, accessible from multiple points and stocked with supplies to last weeks if necessary. He laid Emma on a bed in one of the smaller bedrooms, removing her boots but otherwise leaving her dressed in case they needed to move quickly. She stirred briefly, murmuring something unintelligible before settling back into sleep. In the main living area, Nathan had already set up a secure laptop to examine the contents of the USB drive. James stood by the windows, scanning the property perimeter for signs of threat. "Anything?" Michael asked. "Clean for now," James reported. "But Frost won't stay thrown for long. Those weren't regular federal agents at the bank. They were mercenaries with badges." Michael nodded grimly. "What about the doctor?" "Trustworthy," Nathan confirmed. "On Kingston payroll for years. No digital footprint of his visit here." Michael removed the ledger from the briefcase and opened it on the dining table. Page after page of meticulous records. Transactions, names, dates, account numbers. Sarah's handwriting was as precise as he remembered. Each entry a potential landmine for someone in his organization. "My God," Nathan murmured, looking up from the laptop. "The files on this drive, children, hundreds of them, processed through shell companies, routed through foster care into private rehabilitation centers. Then they disappear." Michael's jaw tightened as he scanned a page in the ledger. "Here, Vance Correctional Consultants. 5 payments of $2 million each, routed through Kingston Capital Partners, the shell company using my name. Someone inside your organization has been working with Vance," James concluded, "using your businesses as cover." "Alexandra knew," Michael said, the betrayal burning cold in his chest. "She was marrying me for access, to expand their operation using my legitimate businesses as fronts." The sealed envelope remained on the table, unopened. Michael stared at it, suspecting its contents would change everything yet again. "Open it," Nathan urged. "If it contains what Sarah suggested." Michael broke the seal and removed several papers. On top was a DNA paternity test, performed at a private laboratory 6 years earlier. He scanned the results, his expression unchanging, though his grip on the paper tightened. "Well?" James prompted. Michael looked up, his eyes meeting those of his oldest friends and allies. "It's me," he said simply. "Emma is my daughter." The confirmation hung in the air, simultaneously expected and shocking. Nathan nodded slowly, accepting the revelation without visible reaction. James exhaled, his military discipline maintaining his composure. "There's more," Michael continued, examining the second document. "A birth certificate listing me as the father, and adoption papers, never filed. She wanted you to have legal rights to Emma if something happened to her," Nathan observed. "But she never told me," Michael said, an unfamiliar emotion coloring his voice. 7 years, and she never told me I had a daughter. She was protecting Emma," came a weak voice from the hallway. Sarah stood leaning against the doorframe, her hospital gown replaced with borrowed sweats, her face pale but determined. "From you, from your world." Michael stood, confronting the woman who had kept his child from him for 7 years. "You had no right." "I had every right," Sarah countered, her strength belying her injuries. "I saw what happened to people in your orbit, Michael. The collateral damage. The children of your associates sent to boarding schools for protection. The wives who disappeared when they became liabilities." She took a painful step forward. "I wasn't going to let Emma become another casualty of your empire." And the accusation hit with precision, piercing armor Michael had built over decades. He had never considered himself a monster, merely a pragmatist in a world that rewarded strength and punished weakness. But seen through Sarah's eyes, through a mother's eyes, his choices took on a different weight. "What changed?" he asked. "Why reach out now?" "Because a greater monster found us," Sarah replied. "Because Emma deserves to live without running. Because," she faltered, gathering her strength, "because despite everything, I believed you would protect your own blood." Michael absorbed her words, feeling their truth resonate within him. He had built his life around power and control, around systems and hierarchies. Emma had crashed through all of that with a simple question. "You're my dad, aren't you?" Before he could respond, security alerts blared from James's phone. He checked the feed from exterior cameras. Vehicle approaching. Multiple signatures. "Frost?" Michael demanded. "No," James replied, his expression darkening. "Worse, it's Alexandra, and she's brought her father." Nathan moved to the windows, confirming the approaching headlights cutting through the snowstorm. 2 SUVs, professional security detail. Sarah straightened despite her pain. "They found us. We need to move Emma." "No," Michael said, his decision immediate and final. "No more running." He turned to James. "Wake Emma. Get her and Sarah to the safe room." "What are you going to do?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Michael Kingston looked down at the paternity test, confirming that Emma Bennett, the child who had walked into his wedding with a loaded gun, was his daughter, his blood, his responsibility. "I'm going to end this," he said, "tonight." The snow fell without mercy, burying Chicago beneath its silent weight. Inside the Lake Forest safe house, Michael Kingston stood in darkness, watching headlights cut through the storm toward a sanctuary. The vehicles moved with military precision, their approach deliberate and unhurried. They had come not to negotiate, but to clean house. Michael adjusted his cufflinks, a reflexive gesture from decades of business dealings where appearance equaled power. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about business. The paternity test lay on the table behind him, its clinical certainty transforming him in ways he couldn't yet articulate. Emma Bennett was his daughter, his blood. For 30 years, Michael had built an empire on the principle that blood was the only loyalty that mattered. Now that principle would be tested. "Sarah and Emma are secure," James reported, returning from the reinforced safe room at the center of the house. "Nathan's with them." Michael nodded, not taking his eyes off the approaching vehicles. "Weapons?" "Full complement. Security positioned at all access points." "Frost?" James checked the surveillance feed on his phone. "No sign yet. But if Alexandra found us..." "He won't be far behind," Michael finished. The lead SUV stopped at the property's gate, its headlights illuminating swirling snow. Through the security camera, Michael watched a driver step out to enter the access code. A code that should have been known only to his inner circle. "We have a leak," James observed grimly. "We've always had a leak," Michael corrected. "Now we'll find out who." The gates swung open, admitting the vehicles onto the private drive. Michael straightened his shoulders, the weight of his concealed Sig Sauer P226, a familiar comfort against his ribs. He'd hoped to shield Emma from further violence, but the world he'd built wasn't designed for gentle solutions. "Let them in," he instructed, "but only Alexandra and her father. Their security stays outside." James relayed the orders through his earpiece. On the surveillance feed, they watched as the vehicles stopped before the house. A brief argument ensued between Alexandra and her driver before she stepped out into the snow, her father following with obvious reluctance. "Remember," Michael said quietly, "we need them alive long enough to confess. For the recording." James nodded, activating the hidden audio system that would document everything said in the coming confrontation. Evidence they would need if their plan succeeded. The doorbell echoed through the house, an incongruously civilized sound given what was at stake. James opened the door, his posture deceptively relaxed despite the firearm concealed beneath his jacket. Alexandra entered first, snowflakes melting on her cashmere coat, her eyes scanning the dimly lit interior with calculated precision. Gone was the blushing bride from the cathedral. This woman moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous rooms. Senator Vance followed, tall and silver-haired, his politician's smile absent for once. His eyes, so similar to his daughter's, betrayed nothing but mild inconvenience, as if this midnight confrontation were merely an unscheduled campaign stop. "Michael," Alexandra said, removing her gloves with deliberate slowness. "This is becoming tiresome." Michael remained by the window, silhouetted against the snow-covered landscape beyond. "I'm sure it is," he replied, his voice controlled. "Hunting children usually is." Alexandra sighed dramatically. "Is that what Sarah told you? That we're monsters preying on innocent children? How predictably maternal of her." "Why are you here, Alexandra?" Michael asked, ignoring the bait. "To salvage what can be salvaged," Senator Vance interjected, his voice carrying the practiced resonance of countless campaign speeches. This situation has become unnecessarily complicated. We're here to simplify it. Michael stepped forward, allowing the soft light from the fireplace to illuminate his face. By simplify, you mean eliminate the evidence, the ledger, the files, the witnesses. Business is business, Michael, Alexandra said, moving further into the room with practiced ease. You of all people should understand that. Is that what you call it? Business? Michael's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Trafficking children through foster care, using government contracts to move them through the system, erasing their identities. Senator Vance cleared his throat. Rehabilitation services for troubled youth is a growth industry, Michael, one you were eager to invest in until today. I never agreed to trafficking. Semantics, Alexandra dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. The arrangements were mutually beneficial. Your money, our political connections. The perfect marriage of interest. Her lips curled in a cold smile. That was the point of our wedding, after all. The casual admission hung in the air, confirming what Michael had already pieced together. His engagement to Alexandra had never been about love or even conventional alliance. It had been about integrating his financial empire with their trafficking network. Where is the Bennett woman? Senator Vance asked, glancing around the room. And the child? Emma, isn't it? Safe, Michael answered. Beyond your reach. Alexandra laughed, the sound brittle in the quiet room. Nothing is beyond our reach, Michael. That's what you failed to understand. We have judges, prosecutors, federal agents. Did you think Agent Frost operates independently? He's one of dozens. A system within the system. A system built on exploiting children, Michael said, his disgust evident. A system built on supply and demand, Senator Vance corrected, his politician's mask slipping to reveal something colder beneath. There has always been a market for certain commodities. We simply created the infrastructure to service it efficiently. Michael's hand twitched imperceptibly closer to his concealed weapon. And Sarah discovered this infrastructure. Sarah Bennett was an accountant who didn't understand her place, Alexandra said sharply. She stole valuable records, threatened our entire operation. And then she compounded her mistake by producing a child with one of you. She studied Michael's face with clinical detachment. You apparently based on your reaction at the cathedral. How did you find this safe house? Michael asked, changing tactics. Alexandra smiled. We have resources inside your organization, Michael. Did you think your inner circle was impenetrable? She gestured vaguely around her. Your security chief designs excellent systems. Unfortunately, he also has a price. James stiffened beside the door, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. Rogers, he murmured, naming his second in command. Very good, Mr. Reynolds, Senator Vance confirmed. Mr. Rogers has been extremely helpful. Financial troubles can make even loyal men vulnerable. Michael processed this betrayal with cold calculation. Rogers had access to nearly every Kingston property, every security protocol. If he had sold this information to the Vances, there was no telling what else he might have compromised. Now sit down, Alexandra said, her tone shifting to businesslike efficiency. Let's discuss terms. We know you have the ledger and the files. We want them, obviously. In exchange, we allow Sarah and the child to disappear. New identities, comfortable allowance. They live, you live, business continues. And if I refuse, Senator Vance sighed heavily, then this location will be raided within the hour by federal agents responding to an anonymous tip about kidnapping and extortion. The Bennett woman will be taken into custody for questioning and tragically die before making a statement. The child will enter the system through proper channels. And you, Michael, will face federal charges that even your considerable resources cannot overcome. The threat was delivered with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to issuing ultimatums. What Senator Vance failed to recognize was the fundamental change that had occurred within Michael Kingston in the past 12 hours. The man standing before him was no longer merely a businessman protecting assets and reputation. He was a father protecting his child. I have a counteroffer, Michael said, moving toward the dining table where a laptop sat open. We're not here to negotiate, Alexandra snapped. You'll want to hear this, Michael insisted, turning the screen toward them. On it played surveillance footage of children being escorted through secure facilities. documents being falsified, money changing hands. This evidence has already been encrypted and uploaded to servers outside the country. If anything happens to Sarah, to Emma, or to me, it goes directly to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency worldwide. Senator Vance's confident expression faltered. You're bluffing. The file is called insurance policy, Michael continued. Sarah's terminology, not mine. She was always meticulous about details. Alexandra's composure cracked for the first time. You can't possibly think this will work. You're implicated in those records too, Michael. Your companies, your transactions. Some of them, Michael acknowledged, but unlike you, I'm prepared to pay that price. He closed the laptop with deliberate finality. So here's what happens next. You walk out of here. You withdraw all your resources, including Agent Frost. You never come near my family again. In return, the evidence remains secured. Your family? Alexandra repeated incredulously. You met that child today. Blood is blood, Michael replied simply. A tense silence filled the room as Alexandra and her father exchanged calculating glances. The balance of power had shifted, though neither was ready to concede defeat. This isn't over, Senator Vance finally said, his political smile returning like a mask sliding into place. You've made a serious miscalculation, Michael. No, Michael corrected. My miscalculation was ever agreeing to join your family. Alexandra's face hardened into something ugly. You think you can protect them? You have no idea what's coming. Before Michael could respond, the security alarm blared throughout the house. James checked the exterior cameras, his expression darkening. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south access road. Tactical formation. Frost, Michael concluded grimly. Alexandra's triumphant smile confirmed his suspicion. Did you think we came alone? That was your final miscalculation. The explosion shook the foundation of the house, shattering windows along the south wall. Emergency lights activated as the main power failed. Through the broken windows came the sound of approaching vehicles and shouted commands. You never intended to negotiate, Michael realized, drawing his weapon. This was a distraction to keep us occupied while Frost positioned his team. Business is business, Alexandra repeated, no longer bothering to hide her contempt. James was already moving, securing the front entrance, while communicating through his earpiece with the security team outside. Perimeter breach, south and east quadrants. Defend the house. Michael grabbed Alexandra's arm with brutal efficiency, pressing his Sig Sauer against her side. You're coming with me. Insurance policy number 2. Senator Vance moved to intervene but froze as James aimed his weapon at the politician's chest. Don't, James warned. You're valuable alive, but not irreplaceable. A second explosion rocked the western side of the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Frost's team was executing a coordinated assault, clearly intending to overwhelm Kingston's security through superior numbers and tactical advantage. The safe room, Michael ordered, forcing Alexandra ahead of him toward the central hallway. Now, James followed with Senator Vance, maintaining professional calm despite the chaos erupting around them. They had prepared for this contingency, though none had expected it to unfold so rapidly. The hidden door to the safe room lay behind a bookcase in the study, accessed through a biometric scanner concealed in an antique desk. Michael pressed his palm to the surface, the mechanism recognizing him instantly. The bookcase slid aside with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a reinforced door beyond. Open it, James instructed as they reached the inner door, which required a separate code. Michael entered the 12-digit sequence. The reinforced steel door unlocked with a series of heavy metallic clicks, swinging inward to reveal a space approximately 20 feet square. Concrete walls, independent ventilation, communications equipment, weapons and supplies sufficient for several days. Nathan stood at the center, his weapon drawn and aimed at the entrance until he recognized Michael. Sarah sat on a small cot against the far wall, her face pale but determined. Beside her, Emma's eyes widened as she recognized Alexandra and Senator Vance being forced into the safe room at gunpoint. Situation? Nathan demanded as James secured the door behind them. Frost's team breached the perimeter, Michael reported, maintaining his grip on Alexandra. Full tactical assault, at least 24 men based on the vehicles. Emma stood, her small face solemn, as she watched Michael maneuver Alexandra to a chair bolted to the floor. "They found us again," she said. Not a question, but a sad confirmation. "Yes," Michael acknowledged, "but they won't get what they came for." Alexandra laughed bitterly as James secured her wrists with reinforced zip ties. "You think this room will save you? Frost has equipment that can cut through these walls in hours, and he has the authorization codes to classify everyone in this room as armed and dangerous fugitives." "He doesn't have ours," Nathan replied calmly, checking a tablet connected to the house's surveillance system. "And neither do you." On the screen, multiple camera feeds showed Frost's team systematically breaching the house, room by room. Professional, efficient, clearly experienced in tactical assaults. They moved like military units rather than federal agents, confirming Michael's suspicion that Frost commanded a private army with government credentials. "They're good," James observed dispassionately. "8-man teams, standard breach and clear. They'll reach the study within minutes." Senator Vance settled into his restraints with the resigned dignity of a man accustomed to temporary setbacks. "This accomplishes nothing, Michael. You've merely delayed the inevitable." "Have I?" Michael turned to Nathan, who nodded once and activated a sequence on the tablet. Throughout the house, hidden speakers emitted a high-pitched tone, barely audible inside the safe room. On the surveillance feed, Frost's men paused in confusion, touching their earpieces as the signal interfered with their communications. "What are you doing?" Alexandra demanded. "Creating a diversion," Nathan explained, his attention focused on the tablet, "and broadcasting our insurance policy." On a separate screen, a progress bar indicated data being uploaded to multiple servers simultaneously. The evidence Sarah had accumulated, the ledger's contents, the video recordings, all streaming to secure locations around the world. "Stop that," Senator Vance ordered, straining against his restraints. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Michael replied. "I'm protecting my daughter." The words hung in the air, their significance not lost on anyone in the room. Emma looked up at Michael, her expression a complex mixture of hope and uncertainty. For 7 years, she had lived without a father. Now, in the midst of chaos and danger, she was witnessing a man claim her publicly as his own. Sarah's voice broke the moment. "Michael," she said urgently, "there's something else you should know." He turned to her, noting the increasing pallor of her skin. The hasty evacuation from the hospital had taken its toll on her injured body. "What is it?" "The key Emma knows," Sarah explained, her voice strained with pain and urgency. "It doesn't just unlock the files. It activates a fail-safe I built into Frost's own system." She gestured toward Emma. "Show him, baby." Emma approached the communications console on the safe room wall. With the practiced precision of a child who had rehearsed this sequence countless times, she entered a complex series of numbers and letters. "What is she doing?" Alexandra demanded, a new note of panic entering her voice. "Insurance policy number 3, Sarah answered, a grim satisfaction in her tone despite her weakened state. "Every communication, every order, every authorization code Frost has used for the past year has been logged and routed through a shadow server I installed while working as a contractor for his division." On the main screen, new data began streaming: operational orders, financial transactions, personnel assignments, the entire infrastructure of Frost's trafficking operation, documented in meticulous detail. "That's impossible," Senator Vance breathed. "Those systems are secure, compartmentalized." "Nothing is secure if you know where to look," Sarah replied, "and I built those compartments." The surveillance feeds showed increasing confusion among Frost's assault team as their communications continued to degrade. Some had removed their tactical headsets entirely, resorting to hand signals to coordinate their movements. 60 seconds to total upload," Nathan reported, monitoring the progress bars. James positioned himself by the safe room door, weapon ready. "They'll reach the study in approximately the same time frame." Michael knelt beside Emma, who had completed her task at the console. "You did well," he told her quietly. "Your mother taught you thoroughly." Emma's solemn expression didn't waver. "Will this stop them? For good?" "Yes," Michael promised, though he knew the complexity of dismantling such an entrenched operation. "They won't hurt you or your mother ever again." A thunderous explosion rocked the safe room as Frost's team breached the study beyond. Dust filtered through the ventilation system as the bookcase concealing the entrance was blown inward. "Upload complete," Nathan announced, powering down the tablet. "Evidence secured on 3 continents." Alexandra lunged forward despite her restraints, her composure finally shattering completely. "You idiots! Do you have any idea what you've done? Who you've exposed? There are people involved in this operation who will burn the world down before they allow themselves to be implicated." "Let them try," Michael replied, positioning himself between Emma and the door as a second explosion hit the safe room's exterior. The reinforced door held, but the control panel beside it sparked and went dark. Manual override would be required to open it from inside now, a security feature designed to prevent forced entry that now potentially trapped them inside. "Secondary communications," James instructed Nathan, who activated an independent satellite system built into the safe room for emergencies. "Signal acquired," Nathan confirmed, transmitting our location and situation to Kingston Security Backup Team. On the surveillance monitors, Frost himself appeared in the ruined study, directing his men as they prepared equipment to breach the safe room door. His face betrayed frustration and increasing desperation as reports evidently reached him about the data being distributed worldwide. "He knows," Sarah observed, watching the screen. "He's receiving reports about the evidence." The satellite communication console chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Nathan activated the speaker. "Kingston, this is Agent Michael Reyes, Internal Affairs Division." The voice was crisp, authoritative. "We've received your data package. Frost's authorization has been suspended. Federal backup is en route to your location. ETA 12 minutes. Alexandra and Senator Vance exchanged looks of genuine alarm for the first time. This development had clearly not been part of their contingency planning. "Who is Reyes?" Michael asked Sarah. "My contact," she replied. "The one legitimate agent I found who was investigating Frost's operation from within. I've been feeding him information for months." The surveillance feed showed Frost receiving communication through his headset. His expression transformed from determination to something approaching panic. He barked orders at his team, who immediately began withdrawing from their positions around the safe room door. "They're pulling back," James reported, abandoning the breach attempt. "Frost knows he's burned," Nathan concluded. "His authorization's been revoked. Any action he takes now is unsanctioned." The satellite communication chimed again. "Kingston, this is Reyes. Frost and his team are attempting to evacuate. I've instructed local authorities to establish roadblocks on all access routes from your location. Helicopter support inbound. Hold your position." The next 20 minutes unfolded with surreal intensity. Through the surveillance system, they watched as Frost's operation disintegrated. His men scattered, some surrendering to arriving federal agents, others fleeing into the surrounding woods. Frost himself was cornered attempting to reach his vehicle, forced to ground by the distinctive spotlight of a police helicopter. When the all-clear finally came, it was delivered in person by Agent Reyes himself, a tall man with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much corruption from within his own ranks. "Mr. Kingston," he greeted as James finally opened the safe room door. "The property is secured. Frost is in custody, along with 17 of his men. Senator Vance and Ms. Vance will be taken into separate federal custody for questioning." As federal agents entered to take charge of Alexandra and her father, Michael kept Emma close to his side. The child who had walked into his wedding with a gun had not left his protection since. "Sarah needs immediate medical attention," Michael informed Reyes, gesturing to where she lay, her condition visibly deteriorating. "Medical team is standing by," Reyes assured him. As paramedics entered to attend to Sarah, Emma reluctantly left Michael's side to hold her mother's hand. The tenderness between them was a stark contrast to the violence that had surrounded their lives. "Emma," Sarah whispered, her strength fading, "remember what I taught you. Always." "I will, Mama," Emma promised, her small face composed despite the trauma she'd endured. Sarah looked past her daughter to Michael. "She's yours now," she said. "Protect her better than I could." "I will," Michael vowed, the simple promise carrying the weight of a life irrevocably changed. As Sarah was carefully transferred to a stretcher, Reyes approached Michael. "The evidence you provided will dismantle one of the largest trafficking operations we've ever encountered. But there will be repercussions. Powerful people are implicated." "I'm aware," Michael acknowledged. "My legal team will cooperate fully with your investigation." Reyes studied him with professional assessment. Even if that cooperation implicates your own organizations? Even then, Michael confirmed without hesitation, some prices are worth paying. Emma returned to Michael's side as her mother was carried from the safe room. Without prompting, her small hand found his larger one, a gesture of trust that affected him more deeply than he could express. Reyes noticed the interaction, his expression softening slightly. The child will need protection. This isn't over. Not yet. She has protection, Michael replied, his meaning clear. 1 year later, snow fell gently over Chicago as Michael Kingston stood by the window of his newly renovated penthouse. The city looked peaceful beneath its white blanket, holiday lights twinkling from neighboring buildings. Behind him, Emma was curled on the sofa, reading a book far beyond the typical comprehension of a 6-year-old. The past year had transformed them both. Michael had systematically dismantled and rebuilt his business empire, excising corrupt elements and establishing legitimate operations focused on child welfare and protection. The Kingston Foundation now provided legal and financial support for children in foster care, ensuring transparency and accountability within a system that had once been weaponized against the vulnerable. Emma had adapted to her new life with remarkable resilience. Private tutors had discovered her exceptional intelligence, nurturing abilities that Sarah had recognized and cultivated during their years in hiding. Therapy had helped her process the trauma of her early years. But most importantly, she had found stability in the unexpected bond with her father. The legal fallout had been extensive. Senator Vance awaited trial on multiple federal charges, his political career in ruins. Alexandra had turned state's evidence, providing testimony against higher-level operators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Agent Frost had not been so fortunate, his trial revealing atrocities that shocked even hardened prosecutors. Sarah had survived her injuries, though her recovery had been long and difficult. She lived now in a Kingston-owned property across town, co-parenting Emma with Michael in an arrangement that prioritized their daughter's well-being over past grievances. "Dad," Emma called from the sofa, the words still new enough to catch Michael's attention immediately. "Can we visit Mom tomorrow after my lessons?" "Of course," he replied, turning from the window. "She mentioned wanting to take you ice skating at Millennium Park." Emma nodded, satisfied with this plan, and returned to her book. Michael watched her, still sometimes struck by the reality that this remarkable child shared his blood. The paternity test had confirmed what he'd suspected from the moment she had walked into that cathedral, but the legal adoption 6 months ago had made it official in ways that DNA could not. The silver locket still hung around Emma's neck, a connection to her past that Michael had encouraged her to maintain. Inside, she had added a second tiny photograph opposite the one of her infant self with Sarah, a recent image of herself with Michael, taken on the day his adoption of her was finalized. The intercom chimed, Mrs. Collins announcing dinner. Emma carefully marked her place in her book and slid from the sofa, her movements containing the natural grace of a child who had learned to move quietly for survival. As they walked to the dining room together, Michael reflected on how completely his priorities had shifted in a single year. The empire he had spent decades building now seemed hollow compared to the simple responsibility of ensuring this child's safety and happiness. The man who had once measured success in power and assets now found his greatest achievement in a 6-year-old's trust. In his office, displayed in a custom frame, hung a child's drawing, a man and a little girl holding hands beneath a bright sun. Beneath it, in careful printing, "My dad." It was worth more than everything else he possessed. When Emma had crashed his wedding with a loaded gun and a desperate question, "You're my dad, aren't you?" she had done more than disrupt a ceremony. She had awakened something Michael Kingston had never known existed within himself. The heart of a father, willing to burn down his own world to protect what truly mattered. His blood, his child, his redemption. The anniversary of that snowy night at the cathedral approached, and with it came reflections on how completely life had transformed. Michael's legal team had worked tirelessly to insulate Emma from the media frenzy that followed the dismantling of the trafficking network. High-profile arrests continued months after the initial raid, each one sending shockwaves through political and business circles. Names that had once graced charity galas and corporate boards has now headlined indictments and plea deals. "Time for bed," Michael reminded Emma, who reluctantly closed her book. "Just one more chapter?" she negotiated, a skill she'd clearly inherited from him. Tomorrow, he promised, with the firm gentleness he'd learned to balance over the past year. School night rules apply, even with tutors. Emma sighed dramatically but complied, slipping her bookmark into place. As they walked to her bedroom, decorated in shades of blue and silver that she'd selected herself, Michael marveled at how routine these moments had become. Bath time, bedtime stories, checking for monsters under the bed, all initially foreign concepts to a man who had once negotiated million-dollar deals before breakfast. "Dad," Emma said as he tucked her into bed beneath her constellation-patterned comforter, "do you think they'll ever come back? The bad people?" The question pierced him. Despite therapy and security measures and all his assurances, fear still lingered in those blue eyes that so resembled his own. "No," Michael answered, settling on the edge of her bed. "Remember what Agent Reyes told us last week? 28 convictions so far. The organization is dismantled." "But there were more," Emma persisted. "Mom said there were people even Frost answered to." Michael nodded, respecting her intelligence too much to offer platitudes. "There were, and the investigation continues. But they can't reach you now. Not ever." Emma studied his face with that penetrating gaze that sometimes made him forget she was only 6. "Because of you. Because of us," Michael corrected gently. "You were brave when it mattered most. Your mother was clever when it counted. I just provided the resources." Emma seemed to accept this assessment, settling deeper into her pillows. "Will you tell me the cathedral story again? The real version?" It had become something of a ritual between them, this recounting. Not the sanitized version that her therapist had suggested, but the truth, acknowledging her courage, her mother's foresight, the danger they'd faced together. Michael had learned that Emma processed fear better when it was named and faced directly, another trait they shared. "Once upon a time," he began, using the fairy tale opening she inexplicably preferred for this very real story, "a little girl walked through a snowstorm to find her father. She carried 3 things: a gun for protection, a photograph for proof, and courage beyond her years." Emma listened with familiar intensity as he recounted that pivotal day, interrupting occasionally to correct details or ask questions. It was their shared history now, being woven into a narrative they both understood. When he finished, Emma's eyelids were growing heavy, but she fought sleep for one more question. "Dad, if you had known about me before, would you have come looking for me?" The question caught Michael unprepared. It probed at his deepest regrets. The years lost, the dangers Emma and Sarah had faced alone, the man he had been before his daughter crashed into his life. "I don't know who I would have been if I'd known about you earlier," he answered honestly. "But I know who I am now because of you, and this version of me would cross oceans to find you." This seemed to satisfy her. Emma's eyes drifted closed, her breathing deepening towards sleep. Michael remained sated beside her, watching over her as she slipped into dreams, hopefully free of the nightmares that had plagued her earlier months. When he was certain she was asleep, he quietly exited her room, leaving the door ajar and the nightlight glowing as she preferred. James waited in the hallway, a respectful distance away. "Nathan's here," James informed him quietly, "with the final reports." Michael nodded, his mind transitioning from father back to businessman. "In my office." Nathan sat in one of the leather chairs before Michael's desk, a portfolio open on his lap. 7 years as Michael's financial advisor had culminated in the past year's monumental task, tracing every dollar connected to the trafficking operation and redirecting those resources toward restitution. "The Luxembourg accounts are closed," Nathan reported without preamble. "Assets liquidated and transferred to the victim's trust as planned." Michael nodded, accepting the documents Nathan handed him. "And the Caymans? More complicated, their banking secrecy laws are fighting us, but our legal team believes we'll prevail within the quarter." Michael scanned the financial summary, dismantling his connection to the criminal enterprises that had intertwined with his legitimate businesses had cost him nearly 40% of his net worth. It was a price he'd paid without hesitation. "The Foundation's first rehabilitation center opens next month," Nathan continued, shifting to more positive developments. "Sarah's program design has been approved by 3 state agencies for implementation. The Kingston Foundation for Child Protection represented Sarah's vision and Michael's resources combined. She had channeled her trauma and expertise into creating what federal authorities now described as a model program for identifying and supporting trafficking victims. She's doing better, Michael noted, thinking of their co-parenting meetings. The new treatments are helping with the chronic pain. Nathan nodded. She mentioned she's considering the teaching position at Northwestern. Child welfare policy development. The mention of Sarah brought another matter to mind. The papers for the trust adjustment. Nathan produced another folder. As requested, Emma's future is secure regardless of what happens with the remaining legal challenges. Michael signed where indicated, establishing irrevocable protections for his daughter's inheritance. The business empire he'd built would eventually belong to Emma, but transformed into something that could stand in the light without shame. "There's one more thing," James said from his position by the window. "Rogers made a deal." Michael's expression hardened at the mention of his former security chief. The man whose betrayal had nearly cost Emma and Sarah their lives had been in federal custody since the night of the safe house raid. "What kind deal?" Michael asked, his voice cooling several degrees. "Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against 3 judges and a prosecutor involved in falsifying placement orders." Michael absorbed this information with outward calm that belied his internal conflict. Rogers had been more than an employee. He'd been trusted, respected, included in the inner circle. His betrayal cut deeper than most. "Let him talk," Michael decided after a moment. "The more of them that go down, the safer Emma will be." The conversation shifted to security matters, the rotating detail assigned to Emma's school, the protocols for her visits with Sarah, the continuous monitoring for any signs of retaliation from those still evading justice. Michael had rebuilt his security team from the ground up after Rogers' betrayal, with James personally vetting every individual who came within 100 yards of Emma. When business concluded, Nathan and James departed, leaving Michael alone with the weight of his responsibilities. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and moved to the window, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. A text message illuminated his phone. Sarah sending a photo of Emma's latest academic assessment. Her intelligence scores placed her years beyond her chronological age, particularly in mathematics and logic. "Like father, like daughter," Sarah had captioned it. The simple acknowledgement of their shared connection to Emma represented hard-won progress. The initial months of their co-parenting arrangement had been tense. Sarah's distrust and Michael's resentment over lost years, creating a barrier that only their mutual love for Emma had eventually breached. Michael opened his safe and removed the silver-framed photograph that had started everything. Sarah in red, himself and his friends surrounding her, all smiling on that New Year's Eve 7 years ago. None of them knowing that life was about to change irrevocably. He studied his younger self, seeing now what he couldn't then, the emptiness behind his smile, the hollowness of success without purpose. Another photo stood on his desk in a matching silver frame, Emma on her 6th birthday, blowing out candles on a cake that Sarah had baked and Michael had clumsily attempted to decorate. Joy radiated from her face, the trauma of her early years temporarily eclipsed by the simple pleasure of being celebrated. That photograph represented everything the past year had taught him about priorities, about legacy, about what constituted real power. The man who had once measured worth in square footage and stock options now found his greatest achievement in a child's unguarded smile. In his private moments, Michael still grappled with the knowledge that he had once been part of the very system that had nearly destroyed his daughter. His companies had unwittingly provided infrastructure for operations that harmed children. His wealth had been built partly on foundations of corruption that he had chosen not to examine too closely. Emma's therapist had suggested that such reckonings were necessary, that Michael's willingness to face his complicity represented the kind of moral modeling his daughter needed. "She doesn't need a perfect father," Dr. Levine had advised. "She needs an honest one." A small sound from the hallway drew his attention. Emma stood in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. The stuffed lion she denied needing clutched against her chest. "Bad dream?" Michael asked, setting aside his scotch. She nodded, crossing to where he stood by the window. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, her slight weight settling against his shoulder in a gesture of complete trust that humbled him each time. "Same one?" he asked softly. "Different," she murmured against his neck. "We were back at the cathedral, but this time you didn't believe me." You let them take me away. Michael tightened his embrace slightly. That would never happen. I know, Emma said with the simple confidence of a child who had tested her father's commitment and found it unbreakable. That's how I knew it was just a dream. They stood together watching the snow fall over Chicago, the city where both had been born, but where only one had been truly awakened. In the glass reflection, Michael could see their profiles side by side. The same determined jaw, the same watchful eyes, unmistakably father and daughter. Do you want me to take you back to bed? Michael asked after several peaceful minutes. Emma shook her head. Can I stay with you a little longer? Just until the snow stops? Of course, he replied, settling into a chair with her curled against his chest. As long as you need. As her breathing gradually slowed towards sleep once more, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. The little girl who had pointed a gun at him in a cathedral had forced him to become someone worthy of being her father. The man who had built empires on intimidation and leverage had discovered a different kind of strength in vulnerability, in love freely given and responsibility willingly shouldered. In his office, that framed childish drawing still held the place of honor. A man and a little girl holding hands beneath a bright sun. My dad. 3 years ago, such sentiment would have seemed alien, even repulsive to the hard-edged businessman who valued control above all else. Now it was his most prized possession. In the quiet of the snowy night, with his daughter's trust embodied in her peaceful sleep against his heart, Michael Kingston finally understood the true meaning of the words engraved in Emma's locket. Blood of mine. Not a statement of ownership or obligation, but the recognition of something both simpler and more profound, that in finding each other they had each found pieces of themselves long missing. He had given Emma his name, his protection, his resources, but she had given him something far more valuable, a second chance to be the man he should have been all along. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Chicago in a blanket of pristine white, nature's way of suggesting that even the darkest places could be transformed, that redemption remained possible for those brave enough to claim it. And in that moment, watching over his sleeping daughter as snow erased the boundaries between earth and sky, Michael Kingston knew with absolute certainty that he would spend the rest of his life being worthy of the title she had given him. Dad.